in line with Father's Day. We're going to be going over the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 5. We're going to be reading a verse of Scripture, verse 29. Deuteronomy 5 and 29. And you've heard me say before, it's kind of funny how certain messages, or sometimes you'll get an idea or something will bring something back up to your remembrance. And I know several of you here probably remember Brother Keith's dad, Speedy Casto. Richard Casto. Now, he's a great man, but he was one that always had a joke or some kind of humorous thing to share with you. And I remember several times he'd be out there in the vestibule, people would come in, he'll say, "You left something behind you." They'd say, "What?" He said, "Your tracks." Then it reminded me of a message, what are we leaving behind? When one of these days we're all going to be gone, and as I said, this is going to be more in tune with our fathers, but what are we leaving behind? If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 29, it says, "Oh, that there was such a heart in them, that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever." Amen. You may be seated. As we said earlier, happy Father's Day to all of our fathers here. I know most of us, as we get older, somebody somewhere along the line, they'll let us know, "Well, you sound like your dad," or you have the mannerisms of your dad. Usually it's a sibling that points that out. "Well, you sound just like Daddy sounded," or something along those lines. Now, when we were younger, if somebody told us we were acting like our dad or sounded like our dad, we'd get offended. But as we get older and somebody makes that statement, folks, it's a badge of honor. I know certainly when somebody tells me something about my dad, I can feel myself get a little full of pride because I know what kind of father I had. I know the man that he was. And you might be saying, "Oh, you say, preacher, you had a perfect dad." Absolutely not. Wasn't perfect at all. And I'll put it this way. If having a perfect dad meant that I would have a different one than I had, I didn't want a perfect dad. God gave me the father that I needed, the father that I'm glad that I had. And like I said, if anybody ever tells me that I sound like Dad or I do this like Dad, it's an honor today. You've always heard us make mention of the guy that said he left home when he was 18 years old and come back when he was about 24. Said he couldn't understand how his dad learned so much in 6 years. And it wasn't his dad that learned everything. Of course, it was he that learned everything. We start out, especially during those teen years, we think our dads don't know anything. As a teenager, we start driving, and we don't know how to drive when we ever get behind the wheel. We don't want to hear, don't want to listen. And even going through just stages of our lives and then growing into adulthood, we think our fathers and our mothers, for that fact, don't know anything. But the older we get and we begin raising our own children, we understand they knew what they were talking about. They've been there. We've never gotten there yet, but once we get there, but guess what happens? That cycle tends to repeat itself. We share with our children. We try to instruct them and lead them in the right way. Don't always listen. They've got to make their own decisions. There comes a time they've got to stand on their own. But yet we have to do the best that we can in teaching them and showing them as they're growing up. Fathers come in many different ways, as we say about mothers. There's, of course, natural fathers. There's adoptive fathers. There's foster fathers. There's grandfathers. Brother Elmer, I hats off to you today that's filling that position of a father. And there's many families that don't have a father in them for various reasons. Maybe through a tragedy that a father is taken away. Maybe that a father just didn't stick around for whatever reason. And the mother has to fill both of those roles. And my hats are off to them today. But we think about what God shows us through His Word. And one of the things that we see, especially when you look back in God leading His children out of Israel, God establishing the walk for them and everything of how they were to conduct themselves, if you see, there's a lot of times that God instructs them to tell their children. Share this with their children. When they ask why this and they ask why that, let them know what God has done. And while we all certainly want to give our children the best, we want to provide for them the best that we could and the best that we can, the greatest thing that we could ever give them is a godly role model. A knowledge of the Word of God, a knowledge of Jesus Christ, and let them see Jesus in us. Let them see the love of God in us. Now, that means not only at church, but also when we're home and behind the doors and we're there where none of the public but we still have to have that godly influence upon our children. And looking back to this message, there's some principles, and some of this I'm going to share with you. I had gotten from a message I listened to with Adrian Rogers many years ago. And I'll tell you what those parts are when we get to them. But there's different principles when we think about raising our children. We think about what principles and morals and ethics and however you want to look at it. But there's the principle, the first one that I want to look at today, is that principle of priority. And understand what are the priorities in our life. Certainly when we have children, they ought to be a priority. And what, if anything in our life, are we willing to die for? I would tell you today, even my boys are grown men. They're in their 30s. Jared's 30. But they're grown men. And to think about it, folks, let me tell you something. Matter of fact, he's older than 30 anyway. He's 31, going to be 32 this year. Time flies, folks, I'm telling you. But even at their age as men and in their own lives and with their careers, if it came to the point that I would have to die for one of them, I'd lay down my life today. Because they're a priority in my life. Now, they don't come before God. They don't come before my relationship with Jesus, but yet they are a priority in my life. And one of the things that Adrian Rogers had talked about, he said, imagine that you're at a funeral. And when you're at this funeral, you're walking around, you're looking, you all of a sudden realize it's your funeral. And he said, as people are walking by, and of course they make comments and people say things, he said, but what would your wife be saying about you? What would your children be saying about you when the time comes that you left this world? What are you leaving behind for them to remember? What are they going to remember most about you? And that principle of priority, of course, our children ought to be a priority. And certainly we know we work to provide for our families. We're provisionaries, if you will. We want to make sure they have clothes to wear, there's a roof over their head, they have food to eat, and every necessity in this life, plus a lot more, folks. And God has blessed us tremendously. We all can say that today. Not only the necessities, but we can provide our children with much more. But yet, when the time comes, down to the very end, what would be the most thing that they remembered us for? What would stand out in their minds that they remember what we did? And I remember, and it really stuck in my mind when Adrian Rogers said this. He said, you know, when the time comes for me to leave this world and my family's gathered around, he said, my children are not going to be concerned with how many sermons I preach. They're not going to be concerned with how many times I did this and how many times. They're going to be concerned with what they learned and the life that I gave them and how that I lived my life before them. And that's what's going to be saying. Sometimes we get caught up, many times with work. We get caught up with different things in life. We get caught up with so many other things, and we may not realize it, and they may never say it, but sometimes our children may feel like they're not a priority anymore. Like they don't have a place in our life where they should, through no fault of their own, folks. No, and I'm not saying we do that intentionally. I can remember growing up, and one of the things that I learned from my father was a good work ethic. My dad worked, it seemed like, all the time. I can remember many times as a young boy getting up in junior high school, I'd get up, and my dad had already been to work. Sometimes get ready to go to bed at night. He still wasn't home yet. Worked in the coal mines, in the deep mine for 40 years. But one thing that he instilled in all of us was to work and be a hard worker. Many times when my boys were young, there were things that I missed that they were doing. Why? Because I was a worker. But yet, it was what I was doing to help provide for them, and I always hoped that they understood that. But what I had noticed in turn is I've never had an issue with either one of my sons working for a living. Never had an issue for them. Both of them started, matter of fact, over here for Joe Eddie when they were in high school, working over here at the produce stand. And they just about worked every day of their life since then. Except for the times, of course, you know how the coal mines are when it comes to robbing. But yet we see, and we need to make our children a priority and know that they're first. Proverbs says this, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children. Now think about that. An inheritance. Now our mind immediately goes to what? A big bank account. And I don't think that's what it's talking about. It's not about money, folks. It's about instilling in them the things of God, instilling in them the things that they will need to make their way through this life. You think about you and I when we grew up. There's some of you here that are older than me, some of you here that are younger than me. And each one of us grew up at a different time. And we've seen things come after that we never thought we'd see before. And our young people today are growing up in a world that's seeing things that's never been seen before. But yet, we have to do the best that we can to prepare them to live the life in this world, but also show them that it's not about this world, because one day it's going to come to an end, and then there's another life you need to be concerned with. But we need to leave an inheritance. A lot of times that inheritance is what? It's honesty. That inheritance is things that we show them how to live a proper life and be a productive young man or young woman in this world. Proverbs also says this: a just man walketh in his integrity, and his children are blessed after him. What are our children going to remember about us? Grandchildren, what are they going to remember about us? Now, grandchildren will probably have a lot better memories than children. You say, what are you saying, preacher? Because I see how people interact with their grandchildren versus their children. Amen. Somebody said one time, if I knew grandchildren was this much fun, I'd have had them first. It just don't work that way, does it? And I've also heard before that said that grandparents and grandchildren get along so well because they have a common enemy, which is the parent. But yet we see, and we need to understand, and when you look at what God said here, He said that it might be well with them and their children forever. And in other places, He talks about their children's children, their grandchildren. What legacy, what are we leaving behind for our children and grandchildren to remember us by? Think about not only the principle of priority, but the principle of purpose. Now this is chapter 6, first 2 verses. And God said, now these are the commandments, Moses said, being directed by God. These are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land whither you go to possess it. That thou mightest fear the Lord thy God, to keep all His statutes and commandments, which I command thee. And listen to what He says here. Thou, thy son, thy son's son, all the days of thy life, that thy days may be prolonged. A principle of purpose. God is telling them here, folks, to tell your children and show your sons and your sons' sons what the purpose is. And the purpose was what? To keep the statutes and commandments that God had commanded them all the days of their life, that their days may be prolonged. We all want our children to do the best that they can. We all want our children to be successful. We all want them to have worry-free lives, but we all know that doesn't happen. And sometimes you'll find, folks, at least we have in our instance, I'm sure others have too, there's times even after they're adults, you hurt more for them than when they were children. And things that they experience. Why? Because when they're children, we can at least put a hedge around them. When they're children, at least we can swoop them up and make things better. Sometimes with just a kiss or just a hug. But when they're adults and they get hurt, there's really nothing we can do, and yet it hurts you to see your children hurt. And we need to give them that purpose and let them know that it's about following the commands of God and the Word of God. The Bible says this, what? The children are like arrows in the hand of a mighty man. You know what arrows are developed for? Some people say hunting, but originally they were to be shot at the enemy. And we can teach our children and let them know that an enemy is coming. And give them that knowledge of the commandments and the words of God that they need to follow, and to know that they'll never go wrong when they're following the Lord. As I said, we all want our children to be successful. We all want our children to be worry-free. We all want our children to have more than we have. And I guarantee you right now, my children had more than I had when I was growing up. And there's nothing wrong with that. But yet, we need to let them know that the purpose is to follow the Word of God, to follow the commands of God, and keep those commands of God. We think about praying for our children. What do we pray for our children? As I said, it may go back there. Well, I pray that they be successful. I pray that everything works out. I pray that they don't have all these worries. I pray that, and when you think about it, do you realize even sinners pray for their children that way? It's the natural instinct of a parent. Right. But how many of us have prayed that God would call our children into the ministry? And I'm going to say something here, you're probably going to think, Pastor, I can't believe you're saying that. I've never asked God to call either one of my sons to preach. Not into the pastor, not to preach the gospel. And it's not that I don't desire it. If God has that call in their life, God's going to call them, but I'm not asking Him to do it. How many of us pray that God, Lord, won't you call my child into the mission field? They can go halfway around the world and put their life on the line, but spread the word of Jesus Christ. We don't pray that way. And we don't see it. Because our desires are to see them successful in this life. But the problem is, this life is not what it's all about. It's about that life to come. That principle of purpose. Now think about this. And a lot of parents, and sometimes you learn this the hard way. You know, we all have goals, I think, when we're growing up. But sometimes as parents, we tend to set goals for our children. We can't set their goals. We can't set anybody's goals but our own. They have to set their own goals. Because if we set somebody else's goals and we want to make them to do what we want them to do, follow the path that we want them to follow, and the line that we draw, guess what? Our heart's going to get broken and we're going to be disappointed. They have to set their own goals. The only thing we can do is show them an example. I've known many parents, folks that have said, hey, my kid graduates high school, they're going to do this, they're going to do this, and they're going to do that, and the kid will go in an opposite direction. And the parents will go, why didn't they go? Because you can't set their goals for them. That's right. You can't live their life for them as much as we would like to. And I think many times, Hope and I will make this statement, you know, what it would be like to have them back running around their feet again. Man. And we've met parents, you know, I used to coach ball for many years, and man, we'd talk to parents, become friends, and you'd have people say, Lord, I can't wait till they grow up and get out of the house. Well, I've never said that about my sons. I've never said that. I wasn't in a hurry for them to live. Matter of fact, I wanted to slow down the growth process and the aging process, but you can't do it. And how many times when you have small children, we were talking about this yesterday, we looked at our boys, and we were having our Father's Day celebration. Jerry's working today, but we were sitting there, and I'm thinking, how many people try to tell us, man, it goes by fast? I said, you just don't understand it. And we try to tell people that now with small children. Man, it's going to be over before you know it. And they kind of laugh. That's true. But you blink your eye and it's over. Amen. And so what we do during those years is going to make a difference in the rest of their life. Thinking about what Brother Sam said and raising his son. We may not realize that as parents, mothers, fathers, however you want to look at it, this being Father's Day, we'll concentrate on the fathers. But when we're raising our children and the things that we do and what they see and how they see us do certain things, we don't realize we're preparing them to be a parent. Because a lot of times they do the same things that we did. Used to crack me up when Robbie, after he got married, and of course, you know, with Jacob and raising him, you know, he'd say, here's the way we want to do things because that's the way Dad did. Or I want to do it this way because this is what we always did when I was growing up. We don't realize that. But that's what happens when we're raising our children. We're preparing them to be parents, and they're going to raise another generation. And a lot of times, the way that we have raised and instructed them is going to have an impact on that generation that comes up after. Not just on our generation. Deuteronomy 6:6 says this. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thy heart. Now this was something I'd taken from Adrian Rogers. So listen to what he said here. He said, I can give you life, but I can't live it for you. I can teach you things, but I can't make you learn. I can give you directions, but I cannot be there to lead you. I can allow you freedom, but I cannot take your responsibility for it. I can take you to church, but I can't make you believe. I can teach you right from wrong, but I can't make the decision for you. I can offer you advice, but I cannot follow it for you. I can give you love, but I can't make you accept it. I can teach you to share, but I can't make you unselfish. I can teach you to respect, but I cannot force you to show honor. I can advise you about your friends. How many of us have been there? But I cannot choose them for you. I can tell you the facts of life, but I cannot build your reputation. I can warn you about drugs, but I can't say no for you. I can tell you about goals, but I cannot achieve them for you. I can teach you about kindness, but I cannot force you to be gracious. I can warn you about sin, but I can't make you moral. I can love you as a child, but I cannot place you in God's family. I can pray for you, but I cannot make you walk with God. I can teach you about Jesus, but I cannot make Jesus your Lord. And I can teach you how to live, but I cannot give you eternal life. Amen. We can do all these things, and it's important that we do these things. But there comes a point in time we've got to come to that realization that the only thing we can do is instruct, guide, and be an example. We can't make the decisions for them. And we think about it, folks, we try to teach our children, and we see them do things that we teach them to do. It brings us a little pride. It makes us shake your head. But then when we see them go against maybe something that we have taught them or something that we have shown them, the first thought we have sometimes is, man, where did I go wrong? If we've done everything that we could, folks, there's no guarantee that our children are all going to be saved. There's no guarantee they're going to follow the Lord. You can bring them up, and this is what I've said often times. I've seen families that have been church-raised families. The whole family, from the youngest to the oldest, have been brought up, and you'll have one or two out of that group that just evil. And I've seen the opposite, where you'll have generation after generation that has been evil and nothing but sin and sorrow through the whole family. And then the next thing you know, a preacher springs up out of the midst of it. And what that tells me is we all have to make our own decisions.
Yes, that's right.
Now, we can't make the decisions for our children, but we can give them the best groundwork in order for them to make the right decision. But what we have to understand many times is when we've done it, we've done it. And they don't always want to do what we've instructed them or showed them, but yet we've done the best that we can do. And I know I heard somebody, matter of fact, I can't remember, several years ago, stood up right over on the right side of the church here and talked about they got saved and later in life and said, you know, I failed my children. I never showed them about Jesus. I never took them to church, and now it's too late. It's never too late.
Amen.
It's never too late. Your children may be grown. They may have their own grandchildren. But guess what? If you come to that saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, you can still be a godly example to them.
Yes,
from that point on.
amen.
You can still show them the love of Christ and show them what Christ has done in your life. Then there's the principle of persistence. You got to do it over and over and over and over. How many times am I going to have to show you? How many times am I going to have to take? As many times. How many times does God have to show us?
That's right.
How many times does He have to tell us? And folks, as long as I've been serving the Lord, as long as I've been preaching and pastoring, there's still times that I get in a situation I think, Lord, you're getting tired of me doing this. Well, you showed me the last time. You showed me the time before that, and the time before that, and now my faith is not what it should be. So what if God looked at us and said, you know what, I'm done with you. I'm finished. Just go on. Believe it or not, there's parents that do the children that way. I'm done with you. Just get out of my face. Go on. I don't want to see you anymore. But that power of persistence, consistency that they see over and over. Listen to what the Scripture says here in Deuteronomy 6 and 7. Thou shalt teach them diligently. Remember the previous verse, His words, which He commanded, would be in our hearts. Teach them diligently unto thy children. Talk of them when thou sittest in the house, when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. You ever hear somebody say, man, you sound like a broken record. Just keep repeating the same thing over and over. Well, sometimes you got to keep repeating until it takes. Sometimes we got to keep going it over and over and be persistent with what it is so they'll understand. Somebody said, a lot of times the teenage years come with the parents' middle-age years, and that's not a good combination. But yet, there's times that we have to be persistent, we have to be consistent, and we have to show them. As somebody said, I said, there'll be times you think you fail, but don't quit. Just keep going and going and going. Probably the best description, I'll close with this, when it comes to a father and his children. And this was given kind of as a father and son. And if anybody's ever seen a relay race where they use a baton, and you know how somebody will start out and they'll get up close to somebody else and they'll hand the baton to them, and then they take it and go on. They said if you really analyze that, you look at the life of a father and his children. The father is running that first leg of the race. And as the children come, it's like he's coming up with that baton. And for a period of time, they're running side by side. And then the baton is handed off and they go on and the father just fades off. He said the important thing here, don't lose those years that you're running side by side. As we stand. Very simply today, Father's Day, and I know as we said the message more geared toward Father's Day. Our earthly fathers, but we have a heavenly Father that loves us with all of our faults, all of our failures, all of our shortcomings. We look out here at people today and we see all manner of evil and all manner of wickedness going on. Do you realize that God loves them today? He looks beyond that wicked heart and He sees the heart that can be there. He looks beyond the deeds and the acts that are going on and He sees what they can be with Jesus Christ. You know, the Scripture tells us He's not willing any should perish, but all come to repentance. And there's nobody that's too far gone, nobody that's sunk too low, nobody that's been too bad or too sinful that God can't save and God can't change. I don't know what your situation or history or memory is of your father, but I can tell you one thing. You have a relationship with a Heavenly Father. It'll be the greatest relationship you have. And that's only possible today through and by Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Only possible today by Him being willing to give His only begotten Son. Do you think of that? A Father giving His only Son. And the only reason is that you and I might be saved. We might be forgiven. Might have our sins. He looked beyond our faults and saw the need. Folks, buried from before the beginning of time. The Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. God knew that man was going to reject. God knew that man was going to disobey. God knew that man was going to turn away. Yet He already put in motion Jesus Christ to die for our sins. His only Son. We know how much we love our children. Matter of fact, the Scripture talks about that. Which one of us is a Heavenly Father? If our child asks for bread, we give them a stone. If they ask for fish, we give them a serpent. You say, preacher, we wouldn't do that. And then he goes on to say, how much more does the Heavenly Father, how much more does God love us as our Heavenly Father? All right. God bless you. Appreciate each and every one today. Anybody have any announcements?